You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got the big news that Trump received a target letter from Jack Smith in the January 6th case. This is the one we've been waiting for at the DOJ. Now, first of all, to what extent is receiving a target letter from the DOJ a guarantee of indictment?
I would say it's a guarantee minus one. Ordinarily, when we're at the end of a sizable grand jury investigation, when we have acquired all of the other evidence that we thought we could acquire, the last thing we'll do is we'll send a target letter to the target of the investigation. Now, in the big grand jury investigations, when there's no secret, we've been investigating a particular person or, a few targets. We will send a target letter to the target and we will say, look, basically, you are about to be indicted. So we are inviting you to appear before the grand jury and testify, and you can try to set the record straight. If you have committed no crimes, perhaps you'd like to come talk to the grand jury and try to convince them of that. Convince us that, maybe we have everything wrong here. Now, I will tell you, Brian, I've sent out lots of target letters. I think only once or twice have I had a target actually take me up on the offer and testify. Why? Because they have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I think it's important to look at the precise definition of a target under the Department of Justice procedures. A target requires two things. One, that prosecutors have substantial evidence linking a person, the target, to the commission of a crime. And two, the prosecutors look at that person as a putative defendant. What does that mean? It's a person the prosecutors intend to indict. So it's not a guarantee that once somebody gets a target letter, they're absolutely going to be indicted. But rarely do prosecutors send a target letter and then for some reason not follow through with an indictment.
Okay, so it's not a guarantee insofar as nothing is really a guarantee until it happens, but it's as close as we can get without it being that guarantee. Is that correct?
I would bet my $1 on it.
Okay.
Yes.
Uh, Glenn, Trump claimed that he received this letter on Sunday. So using that timeline, when might we expect an indictment to be unsealed?
Yeah, I found interesting Trump's assertion that the prosecutors gave him 4 days to come appear before the grand jury. Now, first of all, there's been lots of reporting confirming that a target letter was delivered to Trump. I haven't seen any reporting confirming that, they gave him 4 days to appear, but it may very well be that they gave him 4 days to appear. That is a very short fused deadline. What that signals to me, Brian, is they are ready to indict. And they are prepared to give him 4 days to make the decision whether he wants to appear before the grand jury and testify. Of course, we all know there's no way he's going to appear before the grand jury to testify. So I think at the expiration of that 4 days, we could see a federal indictment for crimes on and around January 6, 2021 in fairly short order, like within a matter of a week or two.
Okay, so does that mean that we have to wait until that period expires to give him the opportunity to be in front of the grand jury before we can see an indictment unsealed?
The only way that 4 day deadline would be altered is if Donald Trump's lawyers today, for example, said, we decline your offer. And then there would be no reason to wait another 3 days. So I think it unlikely. I don't think we're going to see an indictment before the expiration of the 4 days, but we could see one shortly thereafter.
And if this letter was purportedly sent on Sunday, would that mean that we're likely looking at an indictment being unsealed on Thursday?
Could very well be, but I suspect, again, if I had to bet, it's going to go into next week.
Okay. What charges in this case do you anticipate seeing?
Now, I strongly suspect we're going to see a conspiracy indictment. There is a catch-all conspiracy. We call it a 371 conspiracy because that is the federal statute section. It's 18 United States Code, Section 371. It's an extremely broad and sweeping conspiracy. It says if anybody conspires, that is, agrees with others, to commit any offense against the United States or to defraud the United States in any way, like, defrauding the United States out of a free and fair presidential election, that person can be indicted for a 371 conspiracy. So I suspect we're going to see a conspiracy charge. And then the question becomes, how many substantive crimes are included up under that umbrella conspiracy charge. What I'm really hopeful for is that the Department of Justice, Special Counsel Jack Smith, took the January 6th committee up on their recommendation, up on their referral. They said, we have enough evidence to show Donald Trump incited an insurrection, and we are referring him to you, Department of Justice, executive branch, for a possible indictment for inciting an insurrection. The reason I think that's such a crucial charge to bring is that if you're convicted of being involved in an insurrection, then the federal statute says you can be prohibited from ever serving in office again in the future. Not so if all you did, now let me put a pin in all you did. If all you did was obstruct an official congressional proceeding, the certification of Joe Biden's win, that's a crime. It's a very serious crime, but the authorized punishment for that crime does not include prohibiting that person from serving in office in the future. So let's look at some of the other possible offenses, some of the fake elector offenses. If Donald Trump ends up being charged with those and being convicted of those, they are not going to carry with them a prohibition saying Donald Trump can't hold office in the future. So I am hopeful that Jack Smith brings one or more charges that carries the possible sentence of prohibiting Donald Trump from serving in office in the future.
Now, Glenn, with those range of charges, you mentioned insurrection, you mentioned a 371 conspiracy charge, you mentioned anything related to these fake electors, all of which, by the way, just the caveat, this is all hypothetical right now, but with those range of charges, what is the sentencing that we would be looking at for something like that?
You know, he is looking at a de facto life sentence. Why do I say that? Because these charges that we're discussing have maximum punishments like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So if he's convicted of multiple offenses, and I suspect he will be, you can only confine Donald Trump for but so long at his age. But I suspect he will be looking at decades in prison, which in a very real sense will end up being a life sentence for him.
Okay. Glenn, what is the principal defense that Trump is going to put forward in this case?
It depends on what charges are brought. For any conspiracy charge, he will almost certainly try to defend on, wait a minute, to prove a conspiracy, you have to prove I entered into a criminal agreement with another, and you can't prove that I entered into a criminal agreement. Frankly, Donald Trump has been awaiting this day for a very long time to be able to offer that defense in court. Why do I say that? Well, there's a reason he doesn't do text messages. He doesn't do emails. He doesn't put his criminal schemes in writing because he always wanted to be able to defend himself in court someday on, you can't prove that because you don't have me putting any of that in writing.
So as a prosecutor, if you were prosecuting this case, how would you push back against that defense?
It's actually fairly easy. I've prosecuted lots of conspiracy cases, and virtually in every one, there is some variation on that theme. You can't prove I entered into a criminal agreement with another. The fact of the matter is, a criminal agreement for purposes of proving a conspiracy doesn't have to be written, doesn't even have to be expressed. It can actually be inferred. Let me use an example. If I see somebody across the street that I kind of know, and together we see a potential mark, a victim, let's say, the stereotypical little old lady carrying her purse. I look at my associate looks at me, we give each other a nod, and we then go jointly rob that woman of her purse. We've entered into a criminal conspiracy. Was it written? No. Was it spoken? No. But it was inferred. How was it inferred? Based on our conduct. That's how you prove criminal conspiracies. You infer it from the circumstantial evidence, like Donald Trump acting in concert with any number of people to unlawfully retain the power of the presidency, like the John Eastmans and the Jeffrey Clarks, the DOJ official who tried to corrupt and weaponize the Department of Justice to do Donald Trump's dirty bidding. They certainly had an agreement, a criminal agreement, to try to help Donald Trump retain power, but it wasn't in writing. However, it can be inferred from their conduct. That's how you defeat that defense.
And just for any little old ladies watching, just the Glenn that we know and love would never do that to you. So you're all good if you see Glenn on the street walking toward you. Glenn, the four big cases that we're looking at right now are the DOJ classified documents case, the DOJ's January 6th case, the Manhattan DA case for which Trump was already indicted, and the Fulton County case. Can you rank them in order of what you believe will be the most damaging to Trump from a prosecutor's point of view?
It depends on how we define damage. What case is most important from the perspective of the health, indeed viability of our democracy? Hands down, it is the January 6th case. Because if we let a president in the future do what Donald Trump did in the run-up to and on January 6th with impunity, not being held accountable for those crimes, then we can kiss our democracy goodbye in fairly short order, in my opinion. So I think for purposes of the viability of our democracy, January 6th is the most important. Now, what is most likely to land him in prison? The documents case, and that's a misnomer. It's the documents obstruction of justice espionage case, because he's charged with, loosely speaking, 3 batches of crimes involving those three categories of criminal offenses. I think that will almost certainly land him in prison. There's so much precedent for somebody that is found to be in possession of classified information and national defense information that they had no right to be in possession of. Those people go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. So I think that will very likely and fairly easily result in a conviction and prison time. And then I think Fani Willis's case in Georgia is a bit of a wild card, because I sense we are on the cusp of seeing what could be an enormous RICO conspiracy case indicted down in Georgia. We'll know in the coming weeks, and it will almost certainly include Donald Trump as a defendant. And, Fani Willis don't play. So I suspect Donald Trump will be facing some real legal jeopardy in Georgia. And then I think the least consequential one is the false business records case, still a crime in violation of New York state law, but that's being prosecuted by Alvin Bragg up in New York.
And I would also add that the Fulton County case is especially significant because, Trump is pushing all the while to push everything after the 2024 election, in which case he could hope to win the presidency and then use the levers of government to evade accountability for himself. He wouldn't be able to do that in Fulton County because that's a state crime. So even if he did find a way to pardon himself, which of course would be legally dubious, or use a corrupt attorney general to withdraw the DOJ from its own prosecution against him, he wouldn't be able to do that in the Fulton County case. So just adding to the wild card nature of what we're expecting to see out of Georgia. Glenn, let's finish off with this. What is the timeline for next steps here, given that Trump has now officially received the target letter? I know that we spoke about when we can expect the indictment to be unsealed, but just a broader range of what we can expect to see as far as timeline goes.
Yeah, interesting question, because let's assume Donald Trump is indicted for the insurrection in the coming days or weeks. Some people might think, well, is there kind of a first in, first out rule, right? First indictment, first trial? Not necessarily, because the first federal indictment was obviously the one down in Florida, the case over which Judge Aileen Cannon is presiding. But, that has some built-in sort of speed bumps, like the Classified Information Protection Act, CIPA. That tends to build in some delay because they have to go through questions about, well, how do we sanitize the national security information out of these documents that Donald Trump allegedly was unlawfully retaining, and still give the defendant his full right to defend himself at trial by arguing to a jury, for example, well, that really wasn't national defense information in those documents. So it can be a long, drawn-out procedure in the run-up to a criminal trial involving classified documents or national defense information. Espionage charges. They also have to get security clearances for Donald Trump's lawyers. So there are some built-in speed bumps in that case. It could very well be that even though that case was indicted before what we suspect will be the soon-to-be indicted insurrection case, the insurrection case could end up going to trial first. What I am confident of is that the prosecutors and the judges, and to a certain extent, the defense attorneys in the various cases, will all have to do some coordinating with one another to set a common sense schedule about which of Donald Trump's trials go first, go second, go third, go fourth. I mean, whoever thought we'd be talking about 4 criminal trials against a former president of the United States?
Yeah. Well, as things continue to heat up, we'll stay on top of this stuff. So for those of you watching, if you want to stay on top of everything as it continues to unfold and unfold pretty quickly as we're seeing right now, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.